If you watch my channel, you know that I'm very critical about Christianity. I came out of Christianity and now I take a very critical approach. And I like to do a lot of comparative mythology, bring in a lot of scholars, ask questions about how Christianity began, the origins, historicity of Jesus, what's true, what's not, stuff like that. But in this video, I want to give three main reasons, right to the jugular, on why Christianity fails. These are three things, in my opinion, that demonstrate why Christianity fails. Number three is the historicity. And I'm not talking about Jesus' historicity. I'm talking about the Old Testament here. The Bible gives a lot of data on the ages of certain patriarchs going back from Adam all the way to Jesus. We can easily take this data and come up with dates for when was the world created and when was the Great Flood that restarted humanity. The two dates that I'm going to use are from answers in Genesis. 4004 BC is the date for the creation of the world. 2348 BC is the date of the flood. Now, some of you might be saying, but the Bible doesn't give these dates, so how can we know that? It's just as simple as taking the genealogy in either Luke or Matthew, adding up the dates and the ages of the patriarchs and when they had their children, and coming to these numbers. It's very simple. You either believe that these events happened historically, or you just don't think that these are historical events. There's one or the other. You can say it's all metaphor, and that's fine and all. But we're talking about, if this isn't real, if the world wasn't created in 4004 BCE, and Adam and Eve did not sin in the garden, then what is the point of Jesus dying for your sins? You are destined for hell because Adam and Eve sinned. In fact, the year 4004 BCE, we have so much archaeological data of what was happening in the world. There were cities already. There was writing systems. There was governments. There was armies. This was not a year where we see no human activity. That's not the case. We have civilization all over the globe by this time. The United States Census Bureau estimates that the world had around 7 million people in the year 4000 BCE. Another reason for the flood, for me bringing that up, Jesus himself even talks about the flood. Matthew 24:38, where he says, "For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be." This is important because Jesus himself is saying that the flood occurred. If he's wrong and the flood didn't occur, that's a problem. For the year 2348 BC, we know from archaeology that the world had a decent population. In fact, around that time, there's probably around 25 million people living in the world. Archaeology in China, archaeology in Siberia, archaeology in Europe, Africa. There is not a single chance that the world's population started over that year. We have Sumerian tablets from in around this time talking about day-to-day functions. Nobody is talking about the world ending and starting over again. It's impossible. Not only that, even the science behind this flood, that the world was underwater, is physically impossible because there's not even enough water to cover the highest mountain peaks. If these events didn't happen, if Adam and Eve didn't sin, if Adam and Eve aren't historical people who sinned, then Jesus dying for your sins does not even matter. If the flood didn't happen, then Jesus was wrong. Which brings me to the number two, is the end of the world. As I just stated, Jesus is comparing the end of the world to the flood when he says that also the coming of the Son of Man shall be like the flood. In Matthew 16:27, Jesus says that some of you standing here will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. This is a flat lie because everybody who is living in the time of Jesus is long dead. This is a clear false prediction from Jesus himself, saying that the end of the world is at hand and it will be here within some of their lifetimes. That did not happen. The Apostle Paul would even tell people in the epistles not to marry because the world was going to end any day now. From generation to generation, from the first century till now, there has been over 200 major failed end dates from major Christian theologians, including the Pope in the year 1000 CE, in which Pope Sylvester told the world that they had less than 30 years remaining and that everybody should get ready for the coming of the Son of Man. And this did not happen. To this day, Christians are still saying that there is 4 years left, 2 years left, 1 year left, and it never happens. If this isn't true, if we've gone this far and the world hasn't ended yet, does this mean Jesus was wrong? And the number one reason why Christianity fails is the simplest, right for the jugular. I bet you none of your Christian friends will be able to answer this question. And it's simple. What did Jesus sacrifice? Now think about this for a second. You always talk about how when you go to church, everyone's crying at Easter time because Jesus died for your sins and he sacrificed himself for your salvation. But wait a minute. Doesn't John say, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God? Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. This is telling us that Jesus was there in the beginning. He was always there. This was always planned from the start, which not only raises the question is, why was none of this mentioned in the Old Testament? How come Moses didn't know about this? Why is Jesus not mentioned in any of Deuteronomy or Numbers or Leviticus, or giving people the foresight that the Jesus, Son of God, Messiah, would come at a certain time? No one knows about this. Did God change his mind randomly? It just doesn't make sense because, according to Christian theology, all of this was planned from the beginning, which begs the question, what did Jesus sacrifice? If it was planned from the beginning that to redeem Adam and Eve and the world from sin, God would have to take on the form of flesh, go into the world, teach people about heaven, die, and then rise. Get exalted into heaven, become the king of heaven, become the judge of the dead at the right hand of the Father, glorified. Where's the sacrifice? Who was sacrificed? What was sacrificed? To sacrifice something is to give something away that you never get back. The definition of sacrifice: the act of offering something to a deity in proposition or homage, especially the ritual slaughter of an animal or a person. The idea of sacrifice for Yom Kippur was to let free a goat into the wilderness, had the sins of Israel within it. The other goat was slaughtered in the temple as a sin offering. In the case of the New Testament, you have Jesus being taken out to be crucified, and Pontius Pilate offers the Jews one of these prisoners free, either Jesus or Barabbas, in which the Jews asked for Barabbas to be set free and Jesus to be crucified. This is a polemic against Yom Kippur, which means it probably did not happen historically, especially since the Gospel of John says that Pontius Pilate had a tradition every year to do this, when we know from the data that there is no such tradition that exists. Nothing in Josephus, nothing in Philo, nothing in Nicholas of Damascus, none of the first century Jewish writers, nothing in the Talmud. This is not historical. It is a polemic against Yom Kippur. See, the difference is Jesus is taken outside of the temple and slayed, where Barabbas is let go inside Jerusalem, which means there's a reversal happening here. It's being flipped on its head. We no longer need the temple sacrifice. We just need Jesus, who is the Redeemer of the entire world. So with that being said, what did Jesus sacrifice? The answer is nothing. He didn't ever lose his life. Yes, he lost his physical body, but immediately after death, after 3 days, he was exalted into heaven and became the judge of all human beings. According to Revelation, Jesus will stand on the throne and judge the dead for their sins. This is the opposite of being sacrificed. You are one with the creator of the universe. There's nothing that you lost. And if that's your idea of a sacrifice, then I just have to wonder, is this even real? Number 3, 2, and 1 on this list are interconnected in a way. If Adam and Eve are not real historical people and the flood did not actually happen, then what is Jesus dying for? Nothing. With that being said, I want to know what you guys think. Leave a comment below if you think there is a better example of why Christianity fails, or if you are a Christian and you think there's some 3 reasons or 1 reason why you think Christianity succeeds, leave that in the comment as well. I definitely want to read it, and I will comment. With that being said, you have just attained true gnosis.